Hello and welcome. If you've just gotten a microscope or you're looking for better ways to collect samples, I have a few generalized guidelines throughout this video that will ensure you get a great diversity of specimens every time you go out and collect samples. Before I go over where you should be heading to collect these samples, I did want to bring up the equipment you're going to need to give yourself an edge in the field. Of course, you're going to need some sort of collection receptacle like a jar, but it should definitely be waterproof. Canning jars with those orange seals on them, when they're small, are really great because they don't break when you drop them, and they don't let anything leak out. Also, Rubbermaid containers that have the sealing ring around them are fantastic, but I would generally avoid anything without a sealing ring because one, it could end up smelling, and two, you don't want this liquid leaking from that bag if it were to fall over. For plucking out samples from the water, you should bring a turkey baster and an aquarium fish net. A turkey baster is great because microbes can easily fight against the strength of a normal-sized dropper, but the turkey baster is strong enough to suck up pretty much any organism that you want to look at under a microscope. I recommend an aquarium fish net because of its small holes. This allows you to somewhat filter microbes out of their environment so that you can get a much more dense sample. For example, if you have a cubic foot of lake water and you're passing a net through it for about 30 seconds, you can take the density of microbes from 1 per square centimeter to 50 per square centimeter in your sample jar. Now that you have an idea of the equipment in general you should be bringing on your sample hunts, let's talk about where you should specifically be going to get the best results. In order of highest quality samples to lowest quality samples, I would say swamps are the best, ponds second best, lakes are third, and streams and rivers are fourth. I have them in this order because of all the places I've gone out to collect samples, this is where they generally will fall on the scale. From a more scientific perspective, I would say swamps and ponds probably end up being the best because of what they are. They're a body of water that doesn't really flow, and they'll generally be at the base of a mountain or in an area that water drains into but doesn't really move out of. As well, organic material will drain into them, but it won't flow outwards, so you get a really dense area where there's tons of material for bacteria and microbes to eat, but it doesn't flow outwards from that area. I think the edges of lakes are okay around where there's water plants, but as you move into the center, a lot of the material falls to the bottom, which is an area you don't have access to unless you have scuba gear. Finally, for streams, of course there's a lot of material that moves through them. The unfortunate part is that it doesn't really slow down, so you never have this very dense area of microbe activity, except for around those rocks that somewhat jut out of the stream where moss and things can grow, and then microbes can sometimes stick to it. You can get good samples from those, but other than that type of area, they're not too great. So those are the areas where I most commonly go to find samples. Once I get there, it's really important that I focus on a few key things to guarantee my success. The first is I want to find an area, whether it's a swamp, pond, lake, or stream, where there's more than average organic material sitting there, or plants, something like that. Microbes love to live in or around plants, so if you ever see those clumps of algae floating around, you should scoop that right up, because there'll be tons of life in that. And if you just leave it in a small sample jar for an hour or so, you'll see so many microbes flowing out of it, just like this. That was just one ball of a sort of algae I found, and it was absolutely filled with cladocerans, as you can see. Also, lots of insects like to lay eggs around or inside of plants, so you're going to find larvae in these areas in pretty generous numbers. As I said before, you want to use the aquarium fish net to just cycle back and forth and take microbes out of the more open water areas. Most things will catch onto the net that'll be interesting under the microscope, so it will give you a very dense sample size. On top of just grabbing microbes from around the roots of plants and clumps of algae, it's also a great idea to skim around rocks that have moss or any green or brown objects on them. These are generally large colonies of bacteria and other microorganisms that will also contain a lot of flatworms and nematodes. If you're collecting microbes from a river, these are your best shot at getting a good sample. So that's generally my guiding principles when I'm looking for samples. If you like this type of video, leave a comment down below and I'll probably do some more.